The stories you will hear are from real people with real experiences with the unknown. Welcome to the Dixie Cryptid What If It's True podcast. All right, here we go.
My name is Bernard. I'm a 65-year-old retired oil field worker from South Mississippi. I've lived my entire life in a small town about an hour south of Jackson, Mississippi called Bogach. Bogach is Choctaw for Big Creek. Many Native American tribes settled here in the late 1800s, and many property owners discover burial mounds on their properties here. My family farmed all the land we owned, and as children we would spend the summer searching for arrowheads after the fields were plowed. We probably found hundreds of them altogether, and we still occasionally find them today. Once I graduated high school, I set out to make a living in the Gulf of Mexico oil patch. Looking back, I wish I had continued to farm and kept up with my family's dairy farm business. The hard manual labor of drilling rigs took a toll on my body, but it allowed me to provide for my family and live, for the most part, an upper middle class life. Years ago, when my son was 17 years old, I called home to check on him as I did daily, and while I was away at work, my mother and my sister looked after him. On this day, he asked if he and a friend could take a Bigfoot researcher onto my property. Apparently, his buddy had seen a creature cross the road and enter an area of my property the week prior. His friend reported the sighting to the BFRO, and a man wanted to take a look around. Well, I laughed, and I told him that he could go and do whatever they needed to do. I had spent the majority of my life in those woods and never saw a sign of a strange creature being there. The old men in my town would tell tales of skunk apes that lived in the Bogachita river swamps, and a few years earlier, a preacher's daughter said the creature jumped from a tree and slapped her car late one night. I didn't know if any of these stories were a fact, but I later found out for myself that it was all too real. The years passed, and fast forward to 2023, I have a 10-year-old grandson who has become the center of my universe. I wanted to spend all the time I could with him, and a couple of COVID mandates later, I decided to retire and enjoy my golden years. My son and grandson love to deer hunt. Knowing this, I spent months preparing deer plots and getting them set up to have good places to hunt for the upcoming season. A few weeks before opening day, I started to notice that hogs were destroying one of our plots near the river swamp. I went to my local feed store and bought a hay ring, a net wire, a spring-loaded swing gate. I took these items in my welding machine and fabricated an indestructible hog trap to try and lessen the population of these pests. We kill and eat these hogs all the time. I knew I had takers for any that I would catch because, properly cooked, they're fine eating. I placed the trap beside the food plot and attached the trigger wire for the spring gate to a bucket of corn inside. And once those pigs moved that bucket, the gates would close and they would be trapped. My years in the oil field afforded me some of the finer redneck things in life: a four-wheel drive pickup and a side-by-side, and an arsenal of guns from pistols to semi-automatic AR-style rifles with many Wi-Fi game cameras. I had one camera that had seen better days. It would take and send me pictures just fine during the day, but had lost its ability to flash and take pictures at night. So it was the perfect candidate to watch my hog trap. It would send me pictures the next morning to let me know if the trap had been sprung and if I had any hogs to go and remove. I set the trap up on Friday afternoon, and by early evening I got a picture showing me I had 4 hogs in the trap. The next morning my son and I pulled up to the trap just as the sun peeked out, but we were greeted with an empty trap. The gate was closed and there was no damage or holes dug under it. This trap was anchored to the ground using 6 T-posts, each with 4 fence tie wires fastening the trap, and all of them were intact. We found hair on the top end of the net wire, which was at my eye level, and I'm 6'2". Some of the hair was dark, it was almost black, like the hogs I had seen in the photos, but some of the hair was long and light brown. After handling it, the smell on my hand was enough to make a maggot gag. It smelled like a crab house on a tuna boat. Oh man, that's classic. We reset the trap and headed back home, and just like clockwork, when it was early evening, I received another photo telling me there were more hogs in the trap. But the next day, I awoke to the photo from my game cam of a hawk sitting on top of my empty sprung hog trap. I was baffled. How were these hogs getting out? Again, we reset the trap, and around 4 p.m. we arrived and found the empty trap with more hair stuck to the wire. This time we took more time to investigate, and we noticed the grass was beaten down in a path leading from the woods. Well, this got me thinking, was someone coming in and taking these hogs? I pondered on this the rest of the night. If someone was taking them, then how were they doing it? There was no blood inside the trap or around it, and the hogs aren't exactly cooperative, so picking even a small one up and handing it over to another person outside the trap would be damn near impossible. I decided to go back the next day and set the trap, and then get into my box stand with my thermal scope equipped AR-10 and see what I could see. A few hours later, 2 large hogs entered my trap and the gate shut. Now I had the bait, and I was going to wait and see if anything took it. Night came, and I scanned the wood line with my thermal. Around 10 p.m., I heard what sounded like whistles coming from the woods where the grass trail had led. I pulled up my thermal again, and I saw heat signals moving through the trees. And after a couple of minutes, I saw what sort of resembled a human emerge from the tree line and walk toward the trap. When he got there, he had his hands at waist level with his palms straight out. I tried to figure out why he was standing like that when I realized he was so tall that his hands were resting on the net wire of the trap. The large hogs immediately went to the opposite side of the trap, but I could see that the top of their backs were just above this thing's knee. It wasn't but a few seconds later that I heard another series of whistles, and 2 more large figures emerged from the woods and walked to the trap. Once they arrived, the first creature gingerly climbed over into the trap and grabbed one of the hogs, and within seconds its loud squealing stopped, and it was handed over to one of the creatures on the outside of the trap. The second hog was silenced and handed over, and the creature climbed back out and walked with the others back into the woods. Well, I couldn't believe my eyes. I stayed up watching until the batteries in my thermal died, and then I lay down on the floor of my box stand and I tried to sleep. But there was no way I was climbing down until after daylight. About an hour after daybreak, I climbed down and walked to my truck. And I called my son and I told him what I had seen, and he wanted to go back that night to see for himself. And that's what we did. And the exact same thing happened again. Only this time 3 hogs were trapped, and instead of 2 additional figures emerging from the woods, there were 3. My son watched in silence through my thermal binoculars while I watched through my scope. After what we had witnessed, we both agreed that we weren't climbing down until daybreak. And when we climbed down that morning, we walked out to the trap. "Those things have to be nearly 10 feet tall, Dad," my son said. Just as he said it, we heard something near the woods. A second later, a boar hog with its nose to the ground ran out. I quickly shouldered my rifle and took it down, and my son and I walked over to it. It was over 200 pounds. We had about a half a mile to walk to the truck, so we decided to leave it beside a tree stump at the base of our box stand and then come back with the side-by-side to haul it out. We got back home, loaded up the side-by-side, and came straight back to remove the boar. But when we got there, it was gone. There were no drag marks, no pack of coyotes tearing into it. It was just gone. That's when my son noticed a pile of 20 or so pecans sitting on top of a tree stump. each of them perfectly shelled. "Wow, they left us some pecans, Dad," my son said. I asked him what he meant. He explained that last deer season he had been sitting in that stand eating pecans and throwing the shells out the window onto the ground. So the Bigfoot must have assumed that would be a good trade, pecans for pigs. My son collected the gifted pecans, and from their smell he didn't eat them, but he took them with us nonetheless. We didn't set the trap again, and a few days later I brought a trailer and removed it in preparation for deer season. In Mississippi, youth deer season opens a few days earlier than rifle season for all ages. Opening morning, I took my grandson, and just after daylight, a 6-point buck and a doe walked out. And my grandson is a crack shot with a rifle, and before I could blink, he shot the buck and then the doe with his Savage Youth Model 243. We climbed down to assess his first kills of the season. And when I told him we had 2 to skin, he told me, "No, Pawpaw, just 1. Let's take the buck and leave the doe for them. You know, the big feeds." Well, how could I argue with that? We loaded the buck, pulled the doe over near our stand, and left. And we got home and skinned his trophy, and later that day we loaded up the corn to take to a nearby feeder. My grandson asked if we could ride to see if they had taken his gift, and when we got there, we saw that they had. Not only that, but on the stump laid a beautiful fox squirrel tail and a large Indian spearhead. It's not like an arrowhead, it's bigger, and something we searched and searched for as children, but we never found them. My grandson was rightfully excited, and quite frankly, I was too. And when I got him home, he told his father about it. "Those things won't forget anything," my son said. "What do you mean?" I asked him. "This isn't the first time my son has been down there near the swamp. Don't you remember me taking him squirrel hunting down there last year? They were watching him harvest squirrels, and I bet they've been around so long that they remember you searching all that area for arrowheads." My son's words replayed in my head the rest of that day. How long have these things been watching us? How many of them are there? Since that day, we have continued to hunt and gift. I recently put the hog trap back down there, and I reset it a couple of times a week for them. I hope those hogs are feeding their group, maybe their young ones. I also hope that our friendship with them and kindness carry on. Maybe when I'm gone, they will keep a watchful eye over my son and grandson and other generations to come. Thank you for reading my letter, signed Bernard. Oh, I just love that story. That's a story from my home state. He's quite a few miles south of me. I live in the north part of the state, and this man lives south of Jackson. Bogach, I don't think I've ever been there, but I enjoyed reading this story so much, not just because it's from my state, but this man knows how to tell a story. He knows how to recount the thing. Lily, what are you barking at? Lily. She thinks she's a junkyard dog. Anyway, the point is I love this story. I wanted to say one thing. I am real busy with work now, but it's only going to last about another week. If you're commenting and you're noticing I'm not letting you know that I read your comment, like with a heart or with a thumbs up or with a reply, it's just because I'm trying to Lily. Every time I talk to her, she just keeps barking. Anyway, I'm just busy trying to keep podcasts coming out because I love doing these. I love doing these stories. And I just don't have time to go through the comment section, but I will. For the last 3 or 4 videos, the last 3 or 4 short videos I've done, I will go back and read the comments. And I've kind of scanned through them a couple of times, but I'm working 10, 11 hours a day. And when that day's over, I just go in. I don't want to even look at my phone or my computer or anything. So I wanted to let you know that. Thanks for listening to this podcast. I certainly appreciate you. Let me go over here and see. She's probably barking at a butterfly or a spider. I don't know. She thinks she's pretty tough, and she'll see a butterfly. Sometimes she'll chase chicken feathers around the yard, and she'll bark at them. She's a junkyard dog. That's all I'm saying. All right, y'all have a great weekend or week coming up. I appreciate you, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.